Sorry about the car. Things got a little wild, but it was still insured right, my parents said after lending my car to my reckless uncle without asking. The car was insured, but I made them pay out of their own pocket. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Hot rubber burned oil, that sharp metallic scent you only ever notice when something expensive has gone wrong. I hadn't even stepped fully into my parents' driveway yet. I was still halfway out of the taxi when my stomach tightened and my brain did that thing where it tries to explain the obvious away. Maybe the neighbors were working on something. Maybe someone burned food. Anything except what I was already thinking. I'm Theo. I'm 29. I bought my car myself 3 years ago after grinding through long hours, skipped vacations, and more than a few months of eating like a broke college kid. Even though I wasn't one anymore, it wasn't some flashy supercar, but it was mine. Clean title paid off. Something I took real pride in because it represented the first big thing in my life that I didn't owe anyone for. And that's probably why this whole thing hit me the way it did. Growing up, my parents always had this casual relationship with my stuff. Not in an evil cartoon villain way, more in that soft smiling we're family way that somehow makes you feel unreasonable for even questioning it. If I bought something nice, it wasn't really mine in their eyes. It was for the family. If I set a boundary, it was treated like a phase or a misunderstanding. I learned early that pushing back too hard would get me labeled as selfish, dramatic, or ungrateful. So I didn't push much. I moved out at 22, paid my own bills, kept my distance just enough to stay sane. We'd have dinners, birthdays, the occasional Sunday lunch, where everything looked normal on the surface. My parents liked to tell people how proud they were of me. My mom loved to talk about how independent I was. My dad liked to joke about how I was the responsible one. That's why the text I got on a Tuesday afternoon felt so small at first. Hey Theo, don't freak out. We let Uncle Mark borrow your car for the weekend. He needed something reliable. No question mark, no heads up, just a statement like they were telling me they moved a chair. I stared at my phone longer than I probably should have. Uncle Mark, for context, is my dad's younger brother. He's the kind of guy who always has a story about why things never work out for him. Bad bosses, bad luck, bad timing. Somehow, it's never his decisions. He's also the kind of driver who treats speed limits like polite suggestions and maintenance like an optional hobby. I called my mom immediately. She answered on the third ring, cheerful like nothing was wrong. Hey sweetie, you let my car out? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. Oh, Theo, relax, she said. It's just for a couple days. Mark really needed it. That's not the point, I said. You didn't ask me. There was a pause. Not a shock pause, a weighing pause. Well, we didn't think it would be a big deal, she said carefully. You weren't using it? I use it every day, I said. And even if I didn't, it's still my car. She sighed the way she always did when she felt I was being difficult. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. When my dad got on the phone, he didn't even bother pretending to understand why I was upset. It's just a car, Theo, he said. Family helps family. Mark needed a hand. I remember gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. There it was. That phrase, the one that always ended the conversation. Family helps family, as if that automatically erased consent. I told them I wasn't comfortable with it. I told them I needed my car. I told them they should have asked me first. My dad laughed, actually laughed, and said, "You worry too much." I didn't come over. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten anything. I did what I always did when I felt ignored. I swallowed it and told myself I'd deal with it later. Later came faster than I expected. 2 days after that call, I was at work when my phone lit up again. Mom's name. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. Her voice sounded different this time. Tight. Careful. Like she was trying not to panic. Theo, she said. There's been an accident. Everything in me went cold. What kind of accident? I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. Mark had a little trouble on the highway, she said. Everyone's okay, but the car. Well, it's pretty damaged. I remember staring at my computer screen, not really seeing it. Where is it? I asked. It's at a tow yard near our place, she said. Theo, you're still insured, right? That was the moment something shifted. Not snapped. Shifted like a heavy door closing quietly somewhere inside me. You didn't even ask me before lending it, I said slowly. And now you're asking about my insurance. She sounded offended. We're just trying to figure things out. I told you I wasn't okay with this, I said. And we told you not to worry, she replied, irritation creeping back in. Accidents happen. I took a taxi to my parents' house that evening because part of me still couldn't believe it. I needed to see it. I needed proof that this wasn't just another situation they'd downplay until I felt crazy for caring. That's when I smelled it. That's when I saw the bent metal peeking out from behind their garage. The tow truck already gone. The car parked crooked like it had been shoved there and forgotten. The front end was crushed. Headlights shattered. The hood buckled like someone had folded it with their bare hands. It didn't look like a little trouble. It looked like negligence. My dad came outside, hands in his pockets, calm as ever. See, not the end of the world. I didn't answer right away. I walked around the car, noticing details that made my chest ache. The scrape along the side where I knew exactly how it got there, because I'd parked in tight spaces a 100 times and never managed to do that. The smell of coolant, the faint ticking sound as the engine cooled. Mark wasn't there. Of course he wasn't. They said you might need to file something with your insurance, my dad added casually. It'll all get sorted. I looked at him then. Really looked. And for the first time I realized they weren't worried about me at all. They were worried about inconvenience, about paperwork, about how this would reflect on them. I asked one last question. Did Mark apologize? My dad frowned like the question itself annoyed him. He's embarrassed. What more do you want? I wanted respect. I wanted accountability. I wanted someone to acknowledge that this wasn't just a car. It was my time, my money, my boundary. Instead, my mom called from inside and said, "Theo, come in. Let's not stand out here making a scene." That's when my phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number, a photo attachment. It was a picture of my car from the highway taken before it was towed. The caption underneath read, "Sorry about the car." Things got a little wild. And that was when I finally understood something important. This wasn't an accident that just happened. This was the result of people who had never once believed they'd be held responsible for crossing me. I stood there, phone in my hand, parents waiting for me to come inside and smooth things over, like I always did. And for the first time in my life, I didn't follow them. Because in that moment, I realized this wasn't the worst part yet. Not even close. I didn't go inside that night. I told them I needed air, which was half true. What I really needed was distance before I said something I couldn't take back. I drove home in a borrowed car from a friend, my thoughts looping the entire way. Every few minutes, a new detail would surface and make my chest tighten all over again. The casual way my dad said, "It'll get sorted." The fact that Mark couldn't even face me. The way my mom's first instinct was to ask about insurance instead of asking if I was okay. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying old moments I'd brushed off before. Times when my parents volunteered my time, my money, my patience without asking. Helping Mark move when I had deadlines. Loaning him tools that came back broken. Covering for him at family events when he showed up late or not at all. Every time I objected, I was told the same thing. Don't make it awkward. Don't start drama. Don't be difficult. By morning, my phone was already full. Missed calls from my mom. A voicemail from my dad. A text from my cousin asking if I'd heard about the accident yet, like it was community news. Another text from Mark himself. Finally, hours after the fact. "Hey man, really sorry about what happened. Roads were crazy. Stuff happens. That was it. No call, no offer to help. No acknowledgement that he'd taken something of mine without permission and destroyed it." I replied with a single question. "Were you speeding?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "It doesn't matter." He finally wrote, "Insurance will handle it." That phrase again, "in will handle it." Like insurance was a magic eraser that wiped away responsibility. Later that afternoon, my parents asked me to come over to talk things through. I agreed mostly because I wanted answers, and partly because I still hoped stupidly that this would end with them realizing how far they'd crossed the line. They were already sitting at the kitchen table when I arrived, papers spread out between them. My car's registration insurance documents. My mom smiled tightly. "We're just getting organized. Why do you have my paperwork?" I asked. "So we can help you," she said. "You've always hated dealing with this stuff." I reminded her calmly that I hadn't asked for help, that I hadn't even agreed to file a claim yet. My dad leaned back in his chair. "Theo, don't be stubborn. This is what insurance is for." "I wasn't driving," I said. "And I didn't give permission." "That doesn't change anything," he replied. "You're covered." That word again, covered. As if coverage was the same thing as consent. They started talking over each other, then explaining how Mark was already stressed, how this could affect his job, how it would be cruel to make him pay out of pocket when I had good insurance. My mom actually said, "You're in a better position than he is." I stared at her. So because I worked hard and planned ahead, I'm responsible for his mistakes. She frowned. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said, I replied. That's when my dad's tone changed. Sharper, less patient. You're acting like we did this to hurt you. No, I said you did it because you didn't think about me at all. Silence filled the kitchen, the kind that presses on your ears. My mom broke it first. You're overreacting. There it was, the final card, the one they always played. Over the next week, things escalated in small, relentless ways. My parents called daily asking if I'd filed the claim yet. Mark stopped responding to my messages entirely. When I spoke to my insurance company to understand my options, they told me something that made my stomach drop. A claim involving an unauthorized driver could raise my premium significantly, potentially for years. When I told my parents this, they brushed it off. You can afford it, my dad said without hesitation. That sentence stuck with me more than anything else. You can afford it, not you shouldn't have to. Not we're sorry, just you can afford it. At a family dinner that weekend, the story had already been rewritten. My aunt patted Mark's arm and said, "You must have been so shaken." My grandmother shook her head and said, "Cars can be replaced, family can't." I sat there, fork in hand, barely touching my food, listening to my own loss framed as an inconvenience everyone else needed to move past. When I tried to explain that I hadn't even given permission for Mark to take the car, my mom jumped in quickly. "Oh, that's not exactly how it happened," she said, smiling. "We assumed Theo would be fine with it." Assumed, not asked. Not confirmed. Assumed. After dinner, my cousin pulled me aside and whispered, "Between us, Mark said you told him he could take it." I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. "What, that you offered," she said. "That you insisted." I realized then that this wasn't just negligence anymore. This was narrative control. They weren't just minimizing what happened. They were actively rewriting it to protect him. I confronted my parents in private that night. My voice shook despite my best efforts. "Did you tell people I gave permission?" My mom looked away. My dad crossed his arms. We clarified things. My dad said there was confusion. "There is no confusion." I said no. "Well, saying no would have made things complicated," my mom replied quietly. Something in me cracked then. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough that I knew I couldn't go back to the way things were. The real breaking point came 2 days later. I got a call from my insurance company while I was at work. The agent sounded cautious. "Hi, Theo. We just wanted to verify some details on the claim that was filed this morning." My heart started pounding. "What claim?" "There was a pause regarding the accident involving your vehicle. It was reported as taken without your knowledge." I stood up so fast my chair tipped over. "What do you mean, reported?" "The report states the vehicle was used without your consent." She said, essentially a stolen vehicle incident. I felt dizzy. "I didn't file that." Another pause, heavier this time. "The claim was submitted electronically using your account credentials." I hung up and called my parents immediately. My mom answered, breathless. "We were just going to call you," she said. "Did you file an insurance claim in my name?" I asked. "Yes," she said, like it was nothing. "We did what had to be done." "You reported my car as stolen," I said slowly. "It's the easiest way," my dad said in the background. "This way, Mark doesn't get blamed." I couldn't speak. I literally couldn't find words. "You used my account," I said. "You lied. You committed fraud." My mom's voice hardened. "Don't be dramatic. We're protecting family." That was the moment everything fell into place. The favoritism, the assumptions, the way my boundaries evaporated the second they became inconvenient. They hadn't just taken my car. They'd taken my name, my record, my integrity, and used it to clean up someone else's mess without a second thought. I sat down on the edge of my bed, phone pressed to my ear, listening as my dad explained how this was for the best and how I needed to be a team player. My mom reminded me how much they'd done for me growing up, how ungrateful it would look if I pushed back now. I stared at the wall, my reflection faint in the dark screen of my laptop. Somewhere between their voices, a single thought became crystal clear. If this claim went through, the consequences wouldn't land on them or Mark. They'd land on me. And that's when my phone buzzed again. An email notification from my insurance company. Subject line: confirmation of theft report. Immediate action required. I hadn't opened it yet when my dad said, "Just don't talk to anyone else about this." I didn't respond to my parents after that call, not because I was trying to be dramatic, but because I genuinely didn't trust myself to speak without exploding. My hands were shaking long after I set the phone down. I sat there staring at the email from my insurance company unopened like it was something radioactive. One click, and everything could get worse or clearer or irreversible. That night was the lowest I can remember feeling in a long time. Not loud, not cinematic, just quiet and heavy. The kind of exhaustion that sinks into your bones. I kept thinking about how casually they'd crossed a line that could follow me for years. Fraud. That word echoed in my head. Even though no one in my family would ever say it out loud, they didn't see it that way. To them, it was just handling things. I didn't sleep much. When I did drift off, I woke up in a panic, heart racing, convinced I'd missed another call or email. By morning, I felt hollowed out, like something fundamental had been taken from me, and I wasn't sure how to replace it. I called in sick to work for the first time in years. My boss sounded surprised, but understanding. That small kindness almost broke me. It was strange how someone respecting my boundaries without question made me realize how little that happened in my own family. I finally opened the email. It was worse than I expected. The insurance company wanted a recorded statement. They needed clarification about the theft report. They mentioned potential legal implications if the information provided was inaccurate. Reading it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff and realizing the ground beneath you wasn't solid anymore. I called the insurance agent back and told her the truth. All of it. That my parents had lent the car without my permission. That I had explicitly said no. That I hadn't authorized any claim. That I was shocked to find one filed in my name. There was a long silence on the line. Then she thanked me for being honest and said they'd need to open an internal review. She advised me gently but firmly to change my account passwords immediately and document everything. When the call ended, I just sat there. It felt like I'd crossed an invisible line, not toward revenge, toward reality. The fallout started quickly. My parents noticed I'd locked them out of my insurance account within hours. My mom called first, her voice sharp and wounded. "Why can't I log in?" "I changed my passwords," I said. "You had no right," she snapped. "We were handling it." "You were lying in my name," I replied. My dad took over the call. His tone was cold now, stripped of the easy confidence he usually wore. "Do you have any idea what you're doing?" "Yes," I said quietly. "I'm protecting myself." That phrase seemed to offend him more than anything else I'd said before. For the next few weeks, my life shrank. I avoided family gatherings, I stopped responding to group chats, I focused on getting through each day without spiraling. My car sat untouched at my parents' house, a constant reminder of everything that had gone wrong. I took public transit. I borrowed rides. Each small inconvenience felt like punishment for trusting the wrong people. Money got tight. Not catastrophic, but uncomfortable. I had to dip into savings I'd sworn I wouldn't touch. Every time I checked my bank account, I felt a mix of anger and shame, even though logically I knew none of this was my fault. Old habits die hard. It's amazing how quickly you can start blaming yourself when you've been trained to do it your whole life. The hardest part wasn't financial, though. It was emotional. I felt hurt. My parents had always been my fallback, even when they were frustrating. Knowing that they'd chosen Mark over me again in a way that could seriously harm me forced me to confront something I'd avoided for years. They didn't just favor him. They expected me to absorb the consequences of his actions. Quietly, gratefully. That realization hurt more than the accident ever could. I started therapy around that time. I didn't tell anyone in my family. It felt like something sacred, something I didn't want filtered through their opinions. In those early sessions, I talked a lot about the car, about insurance, about betrayal. My therapist listened patiently and then asked a question that stopped me cold. When was the first time you remember feeling responsible for fixing someone else's mistakes? The answer came too easily. As weeks turned into months, something unexpected happened. Without the constant noise of my parents' expectations, my head got clearer. I slept better. I focused more at work. I took on a project I'd been hesitant about before, the kind that actually stretched me instead of draining me. My boss noticed. So did my coworkers. I started saving again slowly. I tracked every expense. I rebuilt what had been chipped away. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was moving forward on my own terms. The insurance situation dragged on, but it didn't explode the way I'd feared because I'd spoken up early, because I'd documented everything. The claim was frozen pending investigation. No payout yet, no blame assigned, yet just a waiting game. My parents, meanwhile, grew colder. They stopped asking how I was. Conversations became transactional. When we did speak, it was laced with guilt. My mom reminded me how stressed she was. My dad warned me that dragging this out could hurt Mark long term. No one asked what it was doing to me. Mark finally reached out one evening, not to apologize, but to pressure me. "You really need to drop this," he said. "You're making things worse than they need to be." "For who?" I asked. "For everyone," he replied. I almost laughed. Everyone never seemed to include me. What surprised me most during this period was how much support I found elsewhere. Friends I hadn't leaned on before stepped up without hesitation. One offered to help me look for a new car when the time came. Another sat with me one night while I vented, never once telling me to forgive or move on. That contrast was impossible to ignore. Slowly, my anger transformed. It didn't disappear, but it sharpened. It became focused instead of chaotic. I stopped fantasizing about explosive confrontations or dramatic speeches. Instead, I started asking practical questions. What did I need to feel safe? What boundaries were non-negotiable? What would accountability actually look like? I realized something else too. My parents had always counted on my silence, on my desire to keep the peace, on my fear of being the bad son. The moment I stopped playing that role, everything shifted. One afternoon, while organizing old documents for the insurance review, I found something interesting. Not related to the accident directly, but relevant. A pattern. Old emails, texts, messages that showed how often decisions had been made about my belongings without my consent. Small things spread over years, forming a clear picture when placed side by side. I didn't do anything with it right away. I just saved it, labeled the folder, carefully backed it up. For the first time since the accident, I felt a sense of control. I still hadn't confronted my parents about the full extent of what they'd done. I hadn't told them about the documentation. I hadn't told them how close they'd come to ruining my record. They assumed I'd eventually smooth things over, let it all fade. They were wrong. One evening, months after the crash, my mom called with a tone I recognized instantly. Sweet. Careful. Like she was preparing to ask for something. "Theo," she said, "we need to talk. There's been a development." I closed my laptop slowly, my heart steady in a way it hadn't been before. "About what?" "About the car," she replied, "and the insurance." As she spoke, I listened closely, not just to her words, but to what she wasn't saying. And when she finished, I realized this wasn't just another update. When my mom said, "There's been a development," I didn't answer right away. Not because I was trying to be dramatic, but because I'd learned something important over the past few months. Silence made people reveal more than words ever could. She filled the gap almost immediately. "The insurance company called your father," she continued. "They're asking questions. Serious ones." I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window of my apartment. It was quiet outside. Normal people walking dogs, cars passing by, life moving on. It felt surreal that my entire family's tension revolved around something I hadn't even caused. "What kind of questions?" I asked. "Well," she said carefully, "they want clarification about who had permission to drive the car." There it was, the moment I'd been waiting for, without fully admitting it to myself. "I already gave them clarification," I replied. She exhaled sharply. "Theo, you didn't need to go that far. I went exactly as far as the truth," I said. Her tone shifted, losing the softness. "You know what this could do to Mark?" I closed my eyes. Same script, different day. After that call, I didn't feel angry. I felt ready. Ready in a way I hadn't been before. The months of therapy, distance, and quiet rebuilding had done their job. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was thinking. I called the insurance agent again and asked what the next steps were. She explained that the investigation was moving forward and that statements from all involved parties would likely be required, including my parents, including Mark. "Should I be worried?" I asked. There was a pause. "You've done everything correctly so far," she said. "Just continue to document and don't let anyone pressure you into changing your account." That word again, pressure. It didn't take long for it to ramp up. My dad called that evening. Not to yell, not to threaten. That would have been easier to dismiss. Instead, he sounded tired, worn down, almost gentle. "You've made your point," he said. "This has gone far enough." "I didn't make a point," I replied. "I told the truth." He sighed. "Families don't handle things like this." I almost laughed. Families also don't commit fraud in each other's names. Silence. Heavy, uncomfortable silence. "You're willing to let this tear everything apart?" he finally asked. That question stuck with me long after the call ended. Not because it made me doubt myself, but because it revealed something fundamental about how they saw the situation. In his mind, accountability was the thing tearing the family apart. Not the lies, not the entitlement, not the expectation that I'd quietly absorb the fallout. That night I pulled out the folder I'd been building, the one I hadn't shown anyone. Old messages from my mom volunteering my car for the weekend. Emails where my dad told relatives to just grab Theo's stuff. Texts where I objected followed by dismissive replies. On their own, each one was small. Together, they told a very clear story. I started organizing everything chronologically, not emotionally, factually. Dates, times, screenshots, notes from phone calls. I didn't know exactly how I'd use it yet, but I knew this. If anyone tried to paint me as unreasonable or dishonest, I wouldn't be scrambling anymore. Around the same time, something else happened that shifted the balance further. A mutual friend of the family reached out to me. Someone I'd always known casually, but never confided in. He asked if we could grab coffee, said he'd heard things and wanted to check in. We sat at a small cafe near my apartment. He looked uncomfortable, stirring his drink more than necessary. "I probably shouldn't be saying this," he started, "but I figured you'd want to know." That phrase alone made my stomach tighten. "Mark's been telling people a story," he continued. "That you offered the car, that you're backtracking now because the damage was worse than expected." I nodded slowly. "I figured there's more." He said he also said your parents are worried you're trying to get him in legal trouble on purpose. That was the first time I felt something close to rage in weeks. Not hot, explosive rage, cold, steady anger. "I'm not trying to get him in trouble," I said. "I'm trying to keep myself out of it." "I know," he replied. "That's why I wanted you to hear this from me." After we parted ways, I walked home with my thoughts racing. They weren't just lying anymore. They were preparing a defense, a narrative where I was the villain, the ungrateful son, the one who chose paperwork over people. Fine. I thought if they wanted a narrative, I'd stick to the truth and let it speak for itself. The next step was practical. I consulted a lawyer not to sue, not yet, just to understand my exposure. What could happen if the insurance company decided fraud had occurred? What responsibilities did I actually have? The consultation was sobering but empowering. The lawyer confirmed what I already suspected. Filing a false theft report under my name was serious, potentially criminal, especially if it could be proven that I hadn't authorized it. "Your priority," he said, "is protecting yourself. Everything else is secondary." For the first time since this started, someone was unequivocally on my side. No caveats, no family qualifiers. As weeks passed, the pressure intensified. My mom sent long messages about stress and sleepless nights. My dad warned me that people were talking. Mark left a voicemail accusing me of ruining his life. I saved everything, didn't respond. I also started setting boundaries more firmly than ever before. When family members reached out fishing for information, I told them politely but clearly that I couldn't discuss the situation. When my parents asked to meet and clear the air, I declined. Not because I was afraid, but because I finally understood the power of timing. They wanted resolution. I wanted accountability. Then came the call that confirmed everything I'd been preparing for. The insurance company scheduled formal recorded statements. One for me, one for my parents, one for Mark. Separate, no coordination. My mom called immediately after she found out. "We should all get on the same page before this," she said, voice tight with urgency. "There's only one page," I replied. "The truth." "You don't understand how this works," she snapped. "You could destroy your uncle." "I didn't destroy anything," I said calmly. "He did." She hung up on me. In the days leading up to my statement, I reviewed my notes repeatedly, not obsessively, methodically. I practiced answering questions without emotion, without embellishment, just facts. I also had quiet conversations with people who mattered, friends, colleagues, even one extended family member who admitted reluctantly that this wasn't the first time Mark had been protected at someone else's expense. Each conversation reinforced the same realization. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't heartless. I wasn't wrong. The morning of my recorded statement, I woke up calm, not numb. Calm, the kind that comes from preparation and self-respect. After it ended, the agent thanked me for my clarity. She said the investigation would continue and that all parties would be notified of next steps. I didn't tell my parents how it went. I didn't need to. That evening, my dad texted me a single sentence. "We need to talk in person. This has gone too far." I looked at the message for a long time before setting my phone down. He still thought this was something I was doing, something I could stop, something I'd started. The meeting happened on a Sunday afternoon. My parents insisted on hosting it at their house, as if familiar walls would somehow tilt the balance back in their favor. I arrived early on purpose. I wanted to walk in calm, grounded, and completely in control of myself before anyone else showed up. Mark was already there when I arrived, sitting at the kitchen table like a guest of honor. My dad stood behind him, one hand resting on the back of Mark's chair in a way that felt almost protective. My mom hovered near the counter arms, crossed lips pressed tight. No one offered me a seat. That alone told me everything. We didn't waste time with small talk. My dad started immediately leaning forward, voice firm but measured. "This has gone far enough, Theo." I nodded once. "I agree." He blinked clearly, not expecting that response. "Good. Then we can fix this." "I already have," I said. Mark scoffed. "You really think you're some hero here?" I finally looked directly at him. Really looked. He wouldn't meet my eyes for more than a second. "I'm not trying to be anything," I said. "I'm just not going to lie for you." My mom jumped in then. "You don't understand what this has done to us. People are asking questions." "Yes," I said calmly. "That's usually what happens when the truth starts surfacing." She shook her head like I was being unreasonable. "You could have handled this quietly." I took a breath. "I tried. You ignored me." That's when I placed the folder on the table. The thick one. The one I'd spent months building. My dad stared at it like it was something dangerous. "What's that, documentation?" I said. "Everything." Mark laughed nervously. "You're bluffing." I opened the folder and slid the first page across the table. A printed email, then another, then screenshots, text messages, dates, highlighted notes, neatly typed. The room went quiet in a way I'd never experienced before. Not awkward, not tense, heavy. "This shows I explicitly said no," I continued. "This shows the car was lent out anyway. This shows the claim was filed without my authorization. And this," I said, tapping another page, "shows the insurance company acknowledged my correction before any payout occurred." My mom's face drained of color. My dad's jaw tightened. Mark stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous." "Sit down," my dad said sharply. Mark froze, then slowly sat back down. "I've already given my statement," I said. "So have you, whether you know it yet or not. The insurance company finished their review last week." My dad swallowed. And they denied the claim." My mom let out a small sound halfway between a gasp and a whimper. "What do you mean denied?" "No coverage," I replied. "Because the driver was unauthorized and because false information was submitted. They also forwarded the file to their fraud review department." Mark jumped up again. "You did this on purpose." "No," I said evenly. "I told the truth on purpose." He turned to my parents. "You said this would be fine." My dad looked like he'd aged 10 years and 10 seconds. "Mark, stop. There's more." I said because the claim was frozen early. My premiums weren't affected. My record is clean. My mom looked at me with something close to disbelief. "So what happens now?" "That depends," I said. "On you." I explained everything slowly. The lawyer consultation, the options I had. The fact that I could pursue identity misuse. The fact that the insurance company could escalate independently if they chose to. My parents listened in silence. For once, no interruptions, no minimizing. "What do you want?" my dad finally asked. I met his eyes. "Accountability." Mark laughed bitterly. "You want me to pay for the car? I don't have that kind of money." "That's not my problem," I replied. My mom stood up. "We'll help him." I nodded. "You can, or you can let this go further." That was the moment something shifted. Not in me, in them. They realized I wasn't asking. I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't emotional or reactive or trying to win an argument. I was offering a boundary with consequences. The agreement came together quietly. Mark would be responsible for the full cost of the damage. My parents would not touch my accounts, my belongings, or my name ever again without explicit permission. Everything would be in writing. Any violation would end contact entirely. It wasn't dramatic, it was surgical. Mark didn't apologize. Not really, but he didn't argue either. He avoided my eyes the entire time. Shoulders slumped, the weight of years of being protected finally settling on him. The fallout came quickly after that. Word spread through the family. Despite my efforts to keep things contained this time, though the story didn't favor Mark. Too many details didn't line up. Too many people started remembering similar incidents, borrowed things that never came back. Mistakes quietly covered up. My parents became quieter, smaller. They stopped calling daily. When they did reach out, it was careful, respectful, almost formal. Mark stopped contacting me entirely. I got my car back months later, repaired, not perfect but functional. When I drove it for the first time after everything, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. Therapy continued, so did rebuilding. I kept my boundaries firm. I didn't cut my parents off completely, but the relationship changed. They knew now that I wasn't a safety net, they could stretch indefinitely. One evening, my dad admitted something he'd never said before. "We relied on you too much," he said, "and we didn't protect you." I accepted the statement without comment. Not because it fixed anything, but because it was the truth. I learned something through all of this. Revenge doesn't always look like shouting or punishment or public humiliation. Sometimes it looks like refusing to be the quiet solution to someone else's chaos. I didn't destroy my family. I stopped letting them destroy me. And for the first time in my life, that was enough.